I kind of fooled around with Sprite Shape and learned the API in Unity, like in the C#, and realized it's really easy to just create points. So once you can create points, right, with this square, you can basically do whatever you want. And so I'll just open up Paint real quick and show you, like in theory, what I did. So you have this block that's a sprite shape with 4 points, and I created a couple points here and here, here and here to like cut into the rectangle. So what I do is expand the square to be fucking massive, and then like dig a little tunnel into it, and then I just start creating squares like this. Some are vertical, some are horizontal. The placement, like the space it elects to add another space to, is random. So every loop it'll try to place blocks, and oftentimes it'll like place them over each other, and there's validation in a while loop just to say, like, yo, if this box is touching another one of the spaces, don't use it, try again. Instead of trying to manage where everything is and proactively avoid it with code, I just say I don't give a fuck, just shotgun a bunch of spaces, and if it's not valid, then just keep trying, and that seems to work really well. And later on I found that's actually the way most people do it, but I didn't do any research before doing this. So effectively what happens is the big square cuts a little hole, and then it just starts to create these spaces that are all attached. And it's kind of gnarly how it does that, because you have to keep track of the index of these points, and depending on the orientation of one space, like for example, if you're taking this space and obviously you're connecting it to this space, you need to find the intersection, like you need to find these 2 points right here and figure out, okay, like what's the index, and then you actually have to figure out what direction to go as you create these points around this box, whether it's counterclockwise or clockwise. It just gets spaces and draws spaces. That's pretty straightforward. And then it does it for a period of time based on some setting of how many spaces you want to create. And then it calls this function called generation finished. And so what I want to do in this guy is just comment out all the things that the post processing that happens after that, so that I can just show you the vanilla, like what it looks like to just have just the raw spaces. But I do need the fixed sprite shape issue. Probably this, probably this, probably this, and this. Okay. Yes. Okay. Some cool things too that I want to show you guys is the mini map that I did recently. It was super easy. I thought it would be super hard. It was actually really easy. And then the add space details. So hopefully this will work. I think it's set for like 30 spaces right now. All right. So if I pause it and we zoom out, we can see this big ass square, right? And then actually what you can see here is these points I was telling you about. But instead of it being an open like area that you can see drilled in, I just took the points and like overlapped them, right? So the ones that were on top I moved down, and the ones that were on down I moved up. So now it looks like a wall. And you can see it started here, and it just started slapping levels together, or slapping like areas together. It's still a lot of work I have to do to get the ratio of like vertical to horizontal levels right, and then the sizing of the levels, but that's all done in this options packet that I have. You can just set the some of the things like the seed, the size of that big ass rectangle, the min max height, min max width, how far the foreground is to the camera, and some other bullshit. Terrain thickness, which that's cool. I want to explain that. But anyways, that's kind of what happens. And so the next step I took after I learned that you could control points dynamically, I immediately wanted to see if I could like make it so that I feel like your dude standing right here. I wanted to make it so you could drill like down through the terrain, and like just, I don't know why, I just wanted to do it. So I did do that, but when you have this many points already, and then you start to deform and rebake the object with this many points, the whole game lags for like 0.3 seconds. So you'd like throw a bomb, and the whole game would just freeze for like, you know, a while. So I kind of gave up, but then I found that if you actually just make smaller chunks, you can do what I wanted to do. So what I ended up doing was for each rectangle, right? Like for each area, I just measured the sides, and I would make like a terrain on the bottom and the sides and the tops. And that worked really well because it has a lot less points and it's not as big. You can like throw bombs and deform it, and it doesn't lag at all. So I'll show you guys what that looks like. Not like all the code because that'll take a while, but generation finished. So this add space detail, we'll uncomment that out and then go to definition. Spaces for each, it just creates terrains. So the space characteristics, enemies, item rooms, all that stuff, we're going to comment out just for a second. It's because I want to show you it adds a lot of time to generate these terrains. And the reason that is because recently I added something I'm calling point marching, where you have 2 points, right? And you measure between those points, and as you go, you have this kind of line that you're just marching kind of up and down randomly to make the exposed edges of the terrain feel kind of random. So you can see here, looks like we have some kind of error, that the edges are now like, I don't know, natural. But you can see the next issue that we had, because I removed grappling and rotation and other stuff. You're now fucked. You can't even double jump, so you can't get up there. So the next thing I had to solve was how to let the player, how to know when the player can't get somewhere. Like in this situation, he can't get up here. And for example, like if he fell down here, like he can't get back up there. So the vertical mechanisms is the next thing that we're going to uncomment. And what that does is it looks at the spaces and tries to see which ones are above each other, and then it knows it needs to create an elevator. So that's elevators solve the issue. I don't think we're running anymore, but the issue where the spaces were like directly above each other, like these two would be, but it does not help you when the spaces are considered horizontal and you still can't get up. So that's where I created these things called platforms. It's not really worth showing the code, but it just creates platforms, and there's some shitty logic that does that. There's an elevator here, and you can see it actually created some terrain to span that gap. There you can see there's still some bugs, like when the pixel marching ends, or the point marching ends, it's not smart enough to know, like, yo, dude, you need to be chill and go meet this other dude right here. It's not doing that. Like here, it's pretty obvious. So there's still some work to be done, but I'm just trying to make progress before I go back into the procedural generator again. Every time I go, it's like a 3-day trip. So create platforms is not getting called. So we're just going to find out where that is and uncomment it. Okay, right there. All right, so that'll do that. I'm also going to uncomment the decorations and the foreground, because those are, I can explain them, but I'll just show it to you so we can save some time here. So there should be platforms now. There isn't bug. I'm not sure what error this is. I've been fucking around in this other scene for all yesterday, and that inevitably creates problems. So you can see that little thing is there. So if you run over here now, you can like jump up and you can like slide down. That helps you get up there. And if you go over to the elevator, I'm still kind of questioning whether or not I should do any marching on the ground, since you can see the dudes getting tossed around. And when you have enemies, they actually get stuck. They don't get stuck. They're smart enough to get unstuck, but they're not really a threat. So here's the elevator. There's no prompt yet to tell the player to hit a button to make it go up. And the camera doesn't track well, but I mean, it's working as good as it can for now. Another thing is if you send it up and then you bail and you want to get back up after like 3 or 4 seconds, it comes back down. So you can see these decorations that are littered across the ceiling and the floor. And what's kind of cool about this is if you click on the procedural generator, also you can see all those all that green shit is those terrains being overlapped across the walls and the ceiling and the ground. And you can also see this line here is this is the camera confiner that I generate so that the camera dollies through the scenes. So that's an attempt to try and keep the camera fixed relatively to the middle so that you can't see, for example, like the bottom of these foreground elements. I'm trying to restrict the view so that you only see like the top portion of them. So anyways, if you look at this procedural generator, I clicked on it right here in the hierarchy, and then this is the inspector window on the right. And so you can expose any script in C# that you put a public variable at the top of, it just exposes it in this script right here. So it's super easy to like config these types of things. So like here you can see that I've defined decorations right here. So this is like an array of a serializable object called decoration that has a prefab, which is just a grouping of objects in Unity. So like some grass. And then how many edges you want to put it on. So here you can say like, I also want grass to be on the left and right sides, and whether or not it flips and how many on average per room. So that's kind of how the vines and stuff happen. The same is true for the foreground decorations, which there's not too many of right now. But after I added those foreground elements, and a cool trick that I did was I added some lighting to them. So you can see like this grass here. As you walk away from it, it actually kind of takes your attention away because it gets darker, and as you get closer, it kind of like flashes up for a little bit. You can see one of the design challenges I'm going to have is you can see this foreground looks really good until you're about right here, and then you can kind of see the bottom of it, and I can solve that a couple different ways. I can not place it so close to the edge, or I could just place more over the top of it. But either way, I'm not too concerned with that. So that's vertical movement. If you'll notice, like we have hearts here. I'm going to fix the bloom on the hearts, but I just add them really quick to give to prototype some combat, because that's the core game loop now is going to be combat, like in the Binding of Isaac, where you have just range projectiles, and eventually there's other layers like orbitals and stuff. But for now, I'm just prototyping ranged combat. I've been tweaking this a bunch. You can see that the actual projectile right now is hard coded to have poison on it because I'm prototyping the poison. Let's first get the item rooms and enemies back and everything else that doesn't exist. So here you can see that the item room has an altar and we're giving it a random item, but I think we hard coded it to be poison right here. So I'm going to undo that. There's only 2 items right now: a health pickup, like looks like a heart, and a poison pickup, which just looks like a poisonous turd. So what I found really helpful is you create all these spaces, right? And you don't try to hydrate the objects with anything other than just like, hey, there's a rectangle and it's connected to this rectangle. And with that information, you can deduce everything you need to after you create all the spaces. Like you can create the terrain whenever you want versus trying to like serialize the operations. Like, oh, I'm going to make this space and I'm going to draw this terrain and I'm going to create enemies and I'm going to add instead I just do all the generation, and that way I can make a really educated decision. But that reflection at the end of the process does take more time, but it's way, way easier to manage. You have this first room, we'll just give it the color green, and then it elects a last room based on how many chained spaces. It tries to find the farthest away spot, and then it elects that to be like the last room, and then it knows every room between the start and finish is a mandatory room. So these are rooms that you have to be able to get through in order to get to the end. Whereas other areas, like for example, this one right here is completely optional. You don't need to get there to get to the end of the level. So I haven't done this yet, but my plan is for optional vertical spaces to add like broken ladders or like broken elevators, where the player at the beginning of the game can take traits like engineering or like lock picking or something, and depending on that choice, it gives them a little more agency to like repair the elevator with engineering, which gives a high chance to repair it to go up here. Or if they don't have it, they can still try to repair it, but there'll be consequence like a 60 to 70% chance of failure, in which case you might fix the elevator but take like a heart of damage or something like that. Other things I'm thinking are like for horizontal paths that are not that are completely optional. For example, like if it was like this, I'd pick the wrong colors, but I think you guys are still tracking. Like if you wanted to get across this span of like spikes or something, there'd be like this grappling surface area up here. And if you upgraded your character to have the grappling ability, kind of like in Rogue Legacy, you can upgrade your character between playthroughs. Then you would have access to like try and grapple through and get over here. Just some ideas. I haven't done that yet. I'm more focused on the item room right now and the ranged combat and trying to make sure that the game's actually fun. So anyways, so then it elects an item room. It elects the item room based on another dead end that's not the actual ending of the level. And I'm not sure that's the right logic, but for right now, that's what we're going with. Okay, cool. So you can see that I used to have debug lines to show you the optional and mandatory paths. It's really hard to focus right now. Okay, there we go. So you can see, because I've indexed the seed, I've memorized what's what. Except for the item room is actually different. The item room used to always be over here. The ending is up here. I haven't defined what an ending does. I mean, I know at a high level it's gonna restart the procedural generator with like a new options packet with a new seed and other information, and like obviously after 3 or 4 of this biome, I'm gonna have to create additional biomes, but that's a long ways away yet. So here's an item room. There's only one right now per level, and this one here is the health pickup. Not much to say about that, I guess. And you can see we uncommented out the enemies, but you can't see them. And I'm doing some tricky stuff with object pooling and occlusion to optimize the editor. It's actually fine if you don't occlude, but when you have the editor, it becomes a piece of shit. So that's a dude. He just dunked himself, apparently. So yeah, we still have poison. Okay, this is what I was working on, was the poison when you hit him, like trying to make him look poisoned and take damage over time. It's not gonna shoot poison projectiles every shot. It'll be like a 1 in 5 chance. Oh, dude, fucking Skyhook. Oh, God, I'm so good. So when the player takes damage, you kind of like, you get knocked back and flash. I've been trying to make it look like you're getting hit and you need to like do something about it. And you can see I'm losing half hearts. And then when you die, right now you can respawn, just because for me it's easier from a debugging perspective, but obviously you won't be able to respawn in the real game. And the companion is a legacy thing. I have ideas on what I can do with him, but I don't know if he's going to be a thing in the early game. I think the companion would be something like an orbital, and I would have to think more about what the variety of those would be and what they would do. So I've added 2 enemies. This piece of shit who's buggy. Obviously, you can see he's not working properly right now. And this dude, this other guy right here, and you can see he's kind of getting stuck right now. And when he gets stuck for more than like a half second, he like jumps, which is funny because you're like, hey, you can't get me, and then he'll like jump up and grab you. It's kind of cool. But anyways, yeah. So that's kind of where I'm at. I'm still trying to refine the ranged combat to make like a fair challenge. There's going to be bouncing obviously throughout, but Trying not to focus on polish too much as I add some of these things like ranged combat. But it's really hard because if you don't, I other people, most people, when they add features to the game, especially programmers that don't do art, they postpone everything, all the juice and all the art to the end. But I found that for me, when I add a feature that looks like shit, it like makes me want to stop. It makes me want to. I just like it immediately deflates my sales, and I feel like I'm working on a pile of. I like can't get over it, so I have to go from beginning to end and like give it a really fair college try. And then I found too that over time, those things change. Like your opinion on things change after you see it many times, and that's like kind of nice too. So I had this idea. I think I told you guys about this already with like the optional elevator that you can fix with engineering or risk it without engineering. Um, and I don't know how I feel about this yet, but the idea really appeals to me. Um, it's like having these, like in Darkest Dungeon they do this, but in Darkest Dungeon I don't like their design as much. You have these choices throughout the game, and the idea is you're trying to make it fair, but at the same time, like it can totally you make your run or break your run, and add enough random events that it creates this random variety for the player, where they feel like they're re-experiencing the game. So that is a challenge, making for making enough events, but it's a small enough chunk that I've found I actually really enjoy making these tiny units of events versus like mashing out long levels. I'm super excited because I feel with enough variety of enemies and the right balance, the ranged item modifiers, um, and then the random events with the procedural generator, and hopefully like a couple more biomes. I think it could be a solid game, like a good, fun game that it will be worth the money, and it'll be replayable. I think one of the bigger things, just as like a takeaway from this project that I learned was initially, so if you actually look, I have these journals that I've been keeping since I started, and the very first journal says, I want to make a game that I would want to play. And then I immediately started making a game I wanted to play and realized like I can't make an MMO, especially as my first game by myself. So I started making a 2D platformer, and it went really well. It was really hard, and I diluted the difficulty to make people happy. And as I did that, the game wasn't even a game. It was you just walked left and right. There was like no difficulty to the game. It was like an exploration game, right? And I started to try and fill those gaps with story, and I tried to fill them with better art, and then I inevitably started adding resources and combat. Um, Started spiraling, but I was always subconsciously moving towards RPG elements, while avoiding my strengths and playing into my weaknesses. Where in I was trying to manage scope in a shitty way, and I was just trying to add art when I suck at art. I was trying to make story where I'm not into story. I mash through story in every game I've ever played. So why would I want a story in my game? And so when I did start creating the procedural generator, I felt kind of guilty at first, like, man, this is the mistake that most people make. But the difference is that we've all been programming for a really long time, and that's actually a huge strength that I was ignoring. Is that that's what gets me going. So I'll put more hours in and be more passionate about it. But it's also something that I'm experienced at. I've stared at errors so long that like creating a procedural generator, although for most people is a major pitfall, for someone like me, is actually a good idea. And so after having done it, like there's still a lot of work obviously to do to it, but with the most of the work done, and now I'm able to focus on these cool things like events, I can start to get a demo out for you guys to play soon. And that was the whole goal. And so I feel like my big takeaway from that is just playing into my strengths and knowing what my strengths are, is huge. I spent a long time feeling like my game sucked ass, and obviously I changed all the art, and I'm happy I did. You can see it looks better, but honestly I'm nostalgic too for the other design of the game where it was more flat. And so, play to your strengths. If you do in anything you do, know what you're good at, and try to capitalize on that. So that's what I'm doing, and hopefully this will be super fun for you guys for months. And after a while, I start to doubt myself, and I'm like, what am I even doing? Especially when I tell people about it, and they're like, yeah, it's cool. And I'm like, do you not understand how fucking awesome this is? But obviously, it's my passion. It's not everyone else's. But it's cool to share it with you guys and have you be a part of the process. Because honestly, I feel like it could be something that hundreds of people would enjoy, and maybe even 1,000. And if I sell it for what I plan to sell for, that'll be like a decent amount of money to prove the concept that I could do this again. And that's the whole goal here, is to like working 8 hours a day with a 2 hour commute, and then doing this for like 3 to 4 hours after putting the kids down and stuff. I'm not burning out, but I know I'm not stupid. I'm not gonna be able to do it forever. So the idea here is to capitalize on this ambition, but hopefully I can get to a point where I have a more normal, less fucked up kind of schedule. So like, this is the game before. You can see those punji sticks down. I don't even know if you saw them, right? They're like brown. Let's see if I can pause it. Right there, right here. You can't even see them, right? So like, I was experimenting with having that backdrop, and this is where I started to realize that like more isn't always better. Like adding stuff like the backdrop and adding all this shit, I was like, yeah, more is always better, right? And I'm like, no, more just complicates shit. And I had like a whole new respect for like art in general, and just thinking that I can just like crush it immediately. Like, I forget how much shit I had to learn to get to this point. I take it for granted now. And that's a huge deal now, knowing that I can see something in my head, and know most of the pitfalls of the design that I'm thinking is actually a huge benefit, because now I'll avoid ideas that normally I would be like, oh, it's a fucking awesome idea. I'd be like, no, that's gonna not work well. Oh, we didn't talk about the mini map. I was gonna tell you guys about that. All right, if you guys are still willing to, yeah, save that shit. See this. The way you do that, the way I did it anyways, is you create another camera, which I assumed I was gonna do already, and that camera is zoomed out um, to the level that you want it to be for the mini map. So, and that is a child of the player. So maybe better to do while we're playing. That way I can show you in 3D space what that looks like. Um, so wherever the player is, so too is the camera. Um, Except for the camera is like way far away from the player. So that's him, and the camera's somewhere way the fuck back here. You can see it right here. So that's cool. Whatever. This camera is rendering shit, but what you can do with that camera, let's go right here, is you can assign this target texture, and I just made this target texture. It's just right click and say like new render texture. And so now that camera is rendering to this texture, and so with this texture, you can just take it like in the UI. You can assign an image, and so like right here is this image in the top right of the actual screen. Well, we're still in 3D space. That was trippy. So here's like the screen, and in the top right, it's just rendering the image. And you can see that that's not actually what the camera is rendering, which is kind of cool. The way that works is with this camera that's attached to the player. I'm sure I'm losing you guys now, but I'm into it, so we're gonna keep going. So here is a camera. There's a culling mask, and there's these layers, right? Everything is on a layer, and so I said only show things that are on the minimap layer, and nothing at the time was on the minimap layer. So if I did like everything, you would see on the target texture, you should see everything. But I think the sort order of the here, let's do this. Yes, that is working. Right there. So now you can see the camera's actually rendering everything for reals. But what I did was I called everything except for minimap, and then for these spaces, like I'm keeping track of these spaces in as rectangles. I just created a like a white image that was the exact dimensions of the room in the procedural generator. So there's actually big ass white squares here. I've just set them to be hidden in the editor, and that's what the camera is picking up on. Is it's rendering to a texture, and then there's a UI image that's displaying that texture and only showing one layer, and that layer has a bunch of shitty high contrast stuff in it. So what's cool is now, whoops, and then if you hit F1, it kind of pulls up. It's not very good right now. I'm not that proud of it, but it was super easy. It literally took like 20 minutes, and I thought it would take like all day. You can see like I'm able to like define the item room as a different color, and at some point I have to make this more detailed and cool looking. But yeah, that's the mini map.